This is the 7th day of the July 88 7-day retreat. We're going to read several selections from 4 different books. The first one, called The Zen Teaching of Huang, translated by John Blofeld. These selections are abridged, they're words or paragraphs, sentences taken out. For what I feel is greater clarity. And the other selections will be from three books by Krishnamurti, one about Krishnamurti. The one is Krishnamurti's notebook. The other one is the third and last biography by Mary Lutyens, The Open Door, and Krishnamurti to himself, his last journal. Since all the material is copyrighted, this tape will not be for sale. Some of these selections, some of us have heard many, many times. Some of them are new, maybe all of them are new. Important in listening is not how old or new the material is that is being read, but are the ears new, fresh? Listening not from memory with its knowledge, but afresh. Huang lived about the 9th and 10th century AD in China, was a Zen teacher with hundreds, at times thousands of students. The dialogue and short sermons, the translator calls them sermons, talks, were gathered by his scholar, disciple, who was the governor of the province where Huang taught, and he was also a scholar of Buddhism. The dialogues are with Pei Su, this disciple who collected the material. So we are about to partake in a question and answer that took place about 1,000 years ago in a country far away. At least so one may think. The questioner says, what is the way and how must it be followed? Huang Po says, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you should wish to follow it? The questioner says, what instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? The word dharma here is translated into truth. It's a Sanskrit word for the Buddha's teachings and also truth. What instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? Huang Po, words used to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Questioner, if those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. Huang, if there are really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a teaching worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the Dharma or teaching of the truth by preachers, for what sort of Dharma could that be? Questioner, if that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Huang, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Questioner, but in this way everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing. Huang, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? But you wanted to seek for something. Questioner, since there is no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? See our line of reasoning, if there's nothing to seek, then there is nothing. Something only exists if we seek for it, or comes into existence in the mind. Huang, not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Void here not meaning a vacuum, but what everything is if it is not known and labeled and reacted to, when it's just what it is. Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Questioner, do you mean that we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? Huang, I have not prevented you, but concepts are related to the senses, and when feeling takes place and concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Question, then should we avoid any feeling in relation to the Dharma or truth? Huang says, where no feeling arises, who can say that you are right? Questioner, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I have asked your reverence? And Huang says, you are a man who doesn't understand what is said to him. What is all this about being mistaken? Questioner, up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You have done nothing to point out the true Dharma to us. Huang, in truth or in the true Dharma, there is no confusion, but you produce confusion by such questions. What sort of true Dharma can you go seeking for? The questioner, since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? And Huang, observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people just like mad dogs barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and leaves. Once I put this question to the Master, how many of the 400 or 500 persons gathered here on this mountain have fully understood your Reverence's teachings? The Master answered, "The number cannot be known." Why? Because this way is through mind awakening. How can it be conveyed in words? Speech only produces some effect when it falls on the uninstructed ears of children. When we talk of the knowledge I may gain, says Huang, the learning I may achieve, my intuitive understanding, my deliverance from rebirth, my moral way of living, our successes make these concepts seem pleasant to us, but our failures make them appear deplorable. What is the use of all that? I advise you to remain uniformly quiescent and above all activity. Do not deceive yourselves with conceptual thinking, and do not look anywhere for the truth, for all that is needed is to refrain from allowing concepts to arise. It is obvious that mental concepts and external perceptions are equally misleading, and that the way of the Buddhas is as dangerous as the way of the demons. Later on he says, so full understanding can come to you only through an inexpressible mystery. The approach to it is called the gateway of the stillness beyond all activity. If you wish to understand, know that a sudden comprehension comes when the mind is purged of all the clutter of conceptual and discriminatory thought activity. Those who seek the truth by means of intellect and learning only get further and further away from it. Not till your thoughts cease all their branching here and there, not till you abandon all thoughts of seeking for something, will you be on the right road. And here he says, though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices and scripture study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception, sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding. And by this understanding you will awake to the truth. When you happen upon someone who has no understanding, you must claim to know nothing. He may be delighted by his discovery of some way to enlightenment, yet if you allow yourselves to be persuaded by him, you will experience no delight at all, but suffer both sorrow and disappointment. Even if you do obtain from him some trifling method, it will only be a thought-constructed thing having nothing to do with truth. Truth is something never lost to you even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It depends on nothing and is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent and uncreated absolute. Ah, it is a jewel beyond all price. And later on he says, when a sudden flash of thought occurs in your mind, when a sudden flash of thought occurs in your mind, and you see it for a dream, or an illusion, then you can enter into the state reached by the Buddhas of the past, not that the Buddhas of the past really exist, or that the Buddhas of the future have not yet come into existence. Above all, have no longing to become a future Buddha. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them. Nor may you entertain the least ambition to be a Buddha here and now. Even if a Buddha arises, do not think of him as enlightened or deluded, good or evil. Hasten to rid yourself of any desire to cling to him. Cut him off in the twinkling of an eye. On no account seek to hold him fast, for 1,000 locks could not stay him, nor 100,000 feet of rope bind him. He goes on, he says, I will now make luminously clear how to set about being rid of that Buddha. Consider the sunlight. You may say it is near, yet if you follow it from world to world, you will never catch it in your hands. Then you may describe it as far away, and lo, you will see it just before your eyes. Follow it, and behold, it escapes you. Run from it, and it follows you close. You can neither possess it nor have done with it. From this example you can understand how it is with the true nature of all things, and henceforth there will be no need to grieve or to worry about such things. So he goes on later, thus all the visible universe is the truth. So are all the sounds. Hold fast to one principle and all the others are identical. On seeing one thing you see all. On perceiving any individual's mind, you are perceiving all mind. Obtain a glimpse of one way and all ways are embraced in your vision, for there is nowhere which is devoid of the way. When your glance falls upon a grain of dust, what you see is identical with all the vast world systems with their great rivers and mighty hills. To gaze upon a drop of water is to behold the nature of all the water of the universe. Moreover, in thus contemplating the totality of phenomena, you are contemplating the totality of mind. All these phenomena are intrinsically void, and yet this mind with which they are identical is no mere nothingness. By this I mean that it does exist, but in a way too marvelous for us to comprehend. But how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that, asks Pei-Su. Huang Po, by realizing that though you eat the whole day through, no single grain has passed your lips, and that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Also, by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other, do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but don't withdraw yourselves from them. Avoid the error of thinking in terms of past, present, and future. The past has gone, the present is a fleeting moment, and the future has not yet come. When you practice meditation, sit, stay perfectly tranquil, and do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. This alone is what is called liberation. Be diligent, be diligent. This is from Krishnamurti's notebook. These were diary entries made in the 60s, in 1961, Krishnamurti, to keep a daily record of his perceptions and states of consciousness. And these were written down in Ojai, California, London, Switzerland, Paris, Rome, Bombay, Madras, Rajghat, and Delhi. And then he stopped doing it. Later on allowed it to be printed. Beauty is never personal. The hills were dark blue and carried the light of the evening. It had been raining, and now great spaces of blue appeared. The blue was ablaze with white clouds surrounding it. It was the blue that made the eyes sparkle with forgotten tears. It was the blue of infancy and innocence. And that blue became a pale Nile green of early leaves of spring, and beyond it was the fire red of a cloud that was gathering speed to cross the hills. And over the hills were rain clouds, heavy and immovable. These clouds were piling up against the hills in the west, and the sun was caught between the hills and the clouds. The ground was soaked, red and clear, and every tree and bush had deep moisture. There were already new leaves. The mango had long, russet, tender leaves. The tamarind had bright yellow small leaves. The rain tree had a few shoots of fresh light green. After a long wait of many months of baking sun, the rains brought comfort to the earth. The valley was smiling. The poverty-ridden village was filthy, smelly, with so many children were playing, shouting, and laughing. They didn't seem to care for anything except the games they were playing. Their parents seemed so weary, haggard, and forgotten. They would never know one day of rest, cleanliness, and comfort, hunger, labor, and more hunger. They were sad, though they smiled readily enough, their eyes forlorn, beyond recalling. Everywhere there was beauty, the grass, the hills, and the clouded sky. The birds were calling, and high in the air an eagle was circling. There were lean goats on the hills, devouring everything that grew. They were insatiably hungry, and their little ones pranced from rock to rock. They were so soft to touch, their skin sparkling, clean and healthy. The boy who was looking after them was singing away, sitting on a rock, and occasionally calling to them. The personal cultivation of the pleasure of beauty is self-centered activity. It leads to insensitivity. The clouds were piling up to the southwest, driven by a strong wind. They were magnificent, great billowing clouds full of fury and space. They were white and dark gray, rain-bearing, filling the sky. The old trees were angry with them and the wind. They wanted to be left alone, though they wanted rain. It would wash them again, clean, wash away all the dust, and their leaves would sparkle again. But they didn't like being disturbed, like old people. The garden had so many flowers, so many colors, and each flower was doing a dance, a skip and a jump, and every leaf was astir. Even the little blades of grass on the little lawn were being shaken. And two old, thin women were weeding it. Two old women, old before their age, thin and worn out. They were squatting upon the lawn, chatting and weeding leisurely. They weren't all there. They were somewhere else, carried away by their thoughts, though they were weeding and talking. They looked intelligent, their eyes sparkling, but perhaps too many children and lack of good food had made them old and weary. You became them. They were you and the grass and the clouds. It wasn't a verbal bridge over which you crossed out of pity or out of some vague, unfamiliar sentiment. You were not thinking at all, nor were your emotions stirred. They were you, and you were they. Distance and time had ceased. A car came with a chauffeur, and he entered into that world. His shy smile and salute were those of yours, and you were wondering at whom he was smiling and whom he was saluting. He was feeling a little awkward, not quite used to that feeling of being together. The women and the chauffeur were you and you were they. The barrier which they had built was gone, and as the clouds overhead went by, all seemed a part of a widening circle, including so many things, the filthy road and the splendid sky and the passerby. It had nothing to do with thought, and feeling was involved in no way. It was like a flame that burned its way through everything, leaving no mark, no ashes. It wasn't an experience with its memories to be repeated. They were you and you were they, and it died with a mind. It is strange, the desire to show off or to be somebody. Envy is hate and vanity corrupts. It seems so impossibly difficult to be simple, to be what you are and not pretend. To be what you are is in itself very arduous, without trying to become something which is not too difficult. To be what you are is in itself very arduous, without trying to become something which is not too difficult. You can always pretend, put on a mask, but to be what you are is an extremely complex affair. Because you're always changing, you're never the same, and each moment reveals a new facet, a new depth, a new surface. You can't be all this at one moment, for each moment brings its own change. So if you're at all intelligent, you give up being anything. You think you're very sensitive, and an incident, a fleeting thought, shows that you are not. You think you are clever, well-read, artistic, moral, but turn around the corner, you find you're none of these things, but that you're deeply ambitious, envious, insufficient, brutal, and anxious. You're all these things turn by turn, and you want something to be continuous, permanent, of course only that which is profitable and pleasurable. So you run after that, and all the many other yous are clamoring to have their way, to have their fulfillment. So you become the battlefield, and generally ambition with all its pleasures and pain, gaining with envy and fear. The word love is thrown in for respectability's sake and to hold the family together. But you're caught in your own commitments and activities, isolated, clamoring for recognition and fame, and you and your country, you and your party, you and your comforting God. So, to be what you are is an extremely arduous affair. If you're at all awake, you know all these things and the sorrow of it all. So you drown yourself in your work, in your belief, in your fantastic ideals and meditations. By then you have become old and ready for the grave. If you're not already dead, inwardly. To put away all these things with their contradictions and increasing sorrow, and be nothing, is the most natural and intelligent thing to do. But before you can be nothing, you must have unearthed all these hidden things, exposing them, and so understanding them. To understand these hidden urges and compulsions, you will have to be aware of them, without choice, as with death. Then, in the pure act of seeing, they will wither away, and you will be without sorrow, and so be as nothing. It was right around not this time. I'll read something from here first. 2 years before Krishnamurti died, Mary Lutyens, who was his friend and biographer, urged him to write some more diary notes, and since he was not able to write very well, his hands were very shaky, she suggested he talk into a tape recorder, which she says he found very nice to do. He enjoyed that, talking into the tape recorder. This is February 25th, 1983. There is a tree by the river, and we have been watching it day after day for several weeks when the sun is about to rise. Almost all of these were talked into the tape recorder in Ojai, California. As the sun rises slowly over the horizon, over the trees, this particular tree becomes all of a sudden golden. All the leaves are bright with life, and as you watch it as the hours pass by, that tree whose name does not matter, what matters is that beautiful tree, an extraordinary quality seems to spread all over the land, over the river. And as the sun rises a little higher, and the leaves begin to flutter, to dance, and each hour seems to give to that tree a different quality. Before the sun rises, it has a somber feeling, quiet, far away, full of dignity. And as the day begins, the leaves with the light on them dance and give it that peculiar feeling that one has of great beauty. By midday, its shadows have deepened, and you can sit there, protected from the sun, never feeling lonely, with the tree as your companion. As you sit there, there is a relationship of deep, abiding security and a freedom that only trees can know. Towards the evening, when the western skies are lit up by the setting sun, the tree gradually becomes somber, dark, closing in on itself. The sky has become red, yellow, green, but the tree remains quiet, hidden, and is resting for the night. If you establish a relationship with it, then you have relationship with mankind. You're responsible then for that tree and for the trees of the world. But if you have no relationship with the living things on this earth, you may lose whatever relationship you have with humanity, with human beings. We never look deeply into the quality of a tree. We never really touch it, feel its solidity, its rough bark, and hear the sound that is part of the tree. Not the sound of wind through the leaves, not the breeze of a morning that flutters the leaves, but its own sound, the sound of the trunk and the silent sound of the roots. You must be extraordinarily sensitive to hear the sound. This sound is not the noise of the world, not the noise of the chattering of the mind, not the vulgarity of human quarrels and human warfare, but sound as part of the universe. It is odd that we have so little relationship with nature, with the insects and the leaping frog and the owl that hoots among the hills calling for its mate. We never seem to have a feeling for all living things on the earth. If we could establish a deep, abiding relationship with nature, we would never kill an animal for our appetite. We would never harm, vivisect a monkey, a dog, a guinea pig for our benefit. We would find other ways to heal our wounds, heal our bodies. But the healing of the mind is something totally different. That healing gradually takes place if you are with nature, with that orange on the tree and the blade of grass that pushes through the cement and the hills covered, hidden by the clouds. It was a cool, fresh morning, and there was the light that California alone has, especially the southern part of it. It is really quite an extraordinary light. We have traveled probably all over the world, most of the world at least, have seen various lights and clouds in many parts of the earth. The clouds in Holland are very close. Here in California, the clouds against the blue sky seem to hold the light everlastingly. The light that great clouds have, with their extraordinary shape and quality. It was a cool, very nice morning, and as you climbed the rocky path up to the great height and looked down into the valley and saw the row upon row of orange trees, avocados, and the hills that surround the valley, it was as though you were out of this world, so completely lost were you to all things, to the weariness, to man's ugly reactions and actions. You left all that behind as you climbed up and up the very rocky path. You left far behind far below the vanity, the arrogance, the vulgarity of uniforms, decorations spread all over your chest, and the vanity and strange costumes of priests. You left all that behind. And as you went up, you nearly trod on a mother with her dozen or more little baby quails as they scattered with chirping into the bushes. As you went on up and looked back, the mother had again gathered them round her, and they were all quite secure under the wings of their mother. You had to climb hour after hour to reach the great height. Some days you saw a bear a little way off, and it paid no attention. And the deer across the gully, they too seemed unconcerned. At last you reached the height of a rocky plateau, and across the hills to the southwest you saw the distant sea, so blue, so quiet, so infinitely far away. You sat on a rock, smooth, cracked, where the sun must for century upon century without any regret, have cracked it. And in the little cracks, you saw tiny little living things scurrying about, and there was that utter silence, complete and infinite. A very large bird, they call it a condor, was circling in the sky. Apart from that movement, there was nothing astir except these tiny little insects. But there was that silence that exists only where man has not been before. It was so peaceful. You left everything behind in that little village so far below you. Literally everything. Your identity, if you had any, your belongings, the possession of your experiences, your memories of things that had meant something to you. You left all that behind, down below there amidst the shining groves and orchards. Here there was absolute silence, and you were totally alone. It was a marvelous morning, and the cool air, which was becoming colder, wrapped around you, and you were completely lost to everything. There was nothing and beyond nothing. You should really forget that word meditation. That word has been corrupted. The ordinary meaning of that word, to ponder over, to consider, to think about, is rather trivial and ordinary. If you want to understand the nature of meditation, you should really forget the word, because you cannot possibly measure with words that which is not measurable, that which is beyond all measure. No words can convey it, nor any systems, modes of thought, practice, or discipline. Meditation, or rather, if we could find another word which has not been so mutilated, made so ordinary, corrupt, which has become the means of earning a great deal of money. If you can put aside the word, then you begin quietly and gently to feel a movement that is not of time. Again, the word movement implies time. What is meant is a movement that has no beginning and no end. A movement in the sense of a wave, wave upon wave, starting from nowhere and with no beach to crash upon. It is an endless wave. Time, however slow it is rather tiresome. Time means growth, evolution, to become, to achieve, to learn, to change. And time is not the way of that which lies far beyond the word meditation. Time has nothing to do with it. Time is the action of will, of desire, and desire cannot in any way, and here the editor says word or words inaudible here, it lies far beyond the word meditation. Here, sitting on that rock with a blue sky, it is astonishingly blue. The air is so pure, unpolluted. Far beyond this range is the desert. You can see it, miles of it. It is really a timeless perception of that which is. It is only that perception which can say it is. You sat there watching for what seemed many days, many years, many centuries. As the sun was going down to the sea, you made your way down to the valley, and everything around you was alight, that blade of grass, that sumac, the towering eucalyptus, and the flowering earth. It took time to come down, as it had taken time to go up. But that which has no time cannot be measured by words, and meditation is only a word. The roots of heaven are in deep, abiding silence. It was right around this time that Krishnamurti was invited to take part in a symposium at the National Laboratory Research Center at Los Alamos, New Mexico, on the subject of creativity in science. He gave a talk, and on the next day he answered questions. If you don't know what Los Alamos is, it says here, Los Alamos is situated at 7,000 feet on a plateau. When Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, the celebrated physicist, discovered the site, it was empty, apart from a small private boys' school. But having been chosen soon after America entered the Second World War to be the center of atomic research in the US, it has grown into a town of some 20,000 inhabitants. The atom bomb was created there. It says here, Kay spoke for over an hour in an overflowing hall that held about 700 people, mostly scientists, though the talk was open to the public. Here's just a short excerpt from the talk and then the last question that he answered. Part of the talk is, can we, as human beings, look at the world as we have made it? I wonder if we ever ask ourselves whether we are individuals at all. Our consciousness is made up of our reactions, our beliefs, our faith, all the prejudices that we have, the multiplication of opinions, the fears, the insecurity, the pain, the pleasure, and all the suffering that human beings have borne for thousands of years. All that is our consciousness. Our consciousness is what we are. And in this confusion, this contradiction, can there be creativity? The topic was creativity in science. So, if thought is not the ground of creation, then what is creation? When does it take place? Surely creation can take place only when thought is silent. Science is the movement of knowledge gathering more and more and more. The more is the measurement, and thought can be measured because thought is a material process. Knowledge has its own limited insight, its own limited creation, but this brings conflict. We are talking about holistic perception in which the ego, the me, the personality does not enter at all. Then only is there this thing called creativity. That is it. And of the two questions that he answered, the last one was, if you were the director of the laboratory with a responsibility for the defense of the country and recognizing the way things are, how would you direct the activities of the laboratory and the research? To this, Kay replied in part, we have divided the world. You are a Christian, I am black, you are white, you are a Caucasian, and I am a Chinese. Whatever the beastly thing is, we are divided, we have fought each other from the beginning of time. Sir, a group of people like you at Los Alamos, you have given your time for destruction. You're doing a great deal of benefit, and on the other hand, you are destroying every human on earth because you have recognized my country, my responsibilities, my defense. And the Russians are saying exactly the same thing on the other side. India, which has immense poverty, is saying the same thing, building up arms. So what is the answer to this? If I have a group of people who say, let's forget all nationalism, all religions, let's, as human beings, solve this problem, try to live together without destruction. If we gave time to all that as a group of absolutely dedicated people who have gathered together at Los Alamos for one purpose, and are concerned with all the things we've been talking about, then perhaps there is something new that can take place. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not a propagandist, but the world is like this now. Nobody is thinking about it. Nobody has a global outlook, a global feeling for all humanity. Not my country, for God's sake. If you went around the world as the speaker does, you would cry for the rest of your life. Pacifism is a reaction to militarism, that's all. The speaker is not a pacifist. Instead, let's look at the cause of all this. If we all seek together the causation, then the thing is solved. But each one has different opinions about the causation and sticks to his opinions, his historical directions or directories. So, sir, there it is. Member of the audience, sir, if I may say so, I think you have convinced us. Krishnamurti, I am not convincing anything. Member of the audience, what I mean is that when once we really try to understand this and do something in that direction, somehow we seem to lack the necessary energy. What is it that is really holding us back? We can see the house is on fire, but still we are not able to do anything about stopping the fire. And Krishnamurti, the house on fire, which we think is over there, is here. We have to put our house in order first. Sir, have to put our house in order first, sir. This is the last thing he dictated into the microphone. Walking down the straight road on a lovely morning, it was spring and the sky was extraordinary blue. There wasn't a cloud in it and the sun was just warm, not too hot. It felt nice. The high mountain was there, impenetrable, and the hills below were green and lovely. And as you walked along quietly without much thought, you saw a dead leaf, yellow and bright red, a leaf from the autumn. How beautiful that leaf was, so simple in its death, so lively, full of the beauty and vitality of the whole tree and the summer. Strange that it had not withered. Looking at it more closely, one saw all the veins in the stem and the shape of that leaf. That leaf was all the tree. Why do human beings die so miserably, so unhappily, with a disease, old age, senility? Why can't they die naturally and as beautifully as this leaf? In spite of all the doctors, medicines, and hospitals, operations, and all the agony of life, and the pleasures too, we don't seem able to die with dignity, simplicity, and with a smile. As you teach children mathematics, writing, reading, and all the business of acquiring knowledge, they should also be taught the great dignity of death, not as a morbid, unhappy thing that one has to face eventually, but as something of daily life, the daily life of looking at the blue sky and the grasshopper on a leaf. It is part of learning as you grow teeth and have all the discomfort of childish illnesses. Children have extraordinary curiosity. If you see the nature of death, you don't explain that everything dies, dust to dust, and so on. But without any fear, you explain it to them gently and make them feel that the living and the dying are one. Not at the end of one's life after 50, 60, or 90 years, but that death is like that leaf. Look at the old men and women, how decrepit, how lost, how unhappy they look. Is it because they have not really understood either the living or the dying? They have used life, they waste away their life with incessant conflict, which only exercises and gives strength to the self, the me, the ego. We spend our days in such varieties of conflict and unhappinesses, with some joy and pleasure, drinking, smoking, late nights, and work, work, work. And at the end of one's life, one faces that thing called death and is frightened of it. One thinks it can always be understood and felt deeply. The child with his curiosity can be helped to understand that death is not merely the wasting of the body through disease, old age, and some unexpected accident, but that the ending of every day is also the ending of oneself every day. There is no resurrection that is superstition, a dogmatic belief. Everything on earth, on this beautiful earth, lives, dies, comes into being, and withers away. To grasp this whole movement of life requires intelligence, not the intelligence of thought or books or knowledge, but the intelligence of love and compassion with its sensitivity. One is very certain that if the educator understands the significance of death and the dignity of it, the extraordinary simplicity of dying, understands it not intellectually but deeply, then he may be able to convey to the student, to the child, that dying, the ending, is not to be avoided. It is not something to be frightened of, for it is part of one's whole life. So that as the student, the child, grows up, he will never be frightened of the ending. If all human beings who have ever lived before us, past generations upon generations, still lived on this earth, how terrible it would be. The beginning is not the ending. And one would like to help. No, that's not the right word. One would like in education to bring death into some kind of reality, actuality, not of someone else dying, but of each one of us, however old or young, having inevitably to face that thing. It is not a sad affair of tears, of loneliness, of separation. We kill so easily, not only the animals for one's food, but the vast unnecessary killing for amusement called sport, killing a deer because that is the season. Killing a deer is like killing your neighbor. You kill animals because you've lost touch with nature, with all the living things on this earth. You kill in wars for so many romantic, nationalistic, political ideologies. In the name of God, you have killed people. Violence and killing go together. As one looked at that dead leaf with all its beauty and color, maybe one would very deeply comprehend, be aware of what one's own death must be, not at the very end, but at the very beginning. Death isn't some horrific thing, something to be avoided, something to be postponed. but rather something to be with day in and day out. And out of that comes an extraordinary sense of immensity. We will end here for today.